The Michigan Man Podcast, episode 201. Jim Brandstatter and Dan Deerdorf are the new broadcast team for Michigan football. No news yet from Mitch McGary, and it's time for another football recruiting update. That and more on this week's show. This is the Michigan Man Podcast on GBMW Go Blue Michigan Wolverine for Wolverine fans from coast to coast. Go Blue, and welcome to this week's show. I'm your host, Mike Fitzpatrick. Compared to the first two recruiting classes of the Brady Hoke era, the class of 2015 is off to a slow start. Not to worry though, Coach Hoke and his staff are working hard to bring in a class that, while small in numbers, should be very high in quality. On today's show, we get our April recruiting update from Tim Sullivan, recruiting editor at the Wolverine magazine and thewolverine.com. Before we bring Tim on, let's check Wolverine news and notes for this week. Last week, we learned that two familiar names would be bringing us all of the play-by-play action this fall on the Michigan Football Network. Longtime color analyst Jim Brandstatter will be handling play-by-play this fall, while Michigan great and Hall of Famer Dan Deerdorf will join him as the radio color analyst. On next week's show, Jim will be my guest, and we'll talk about his move to play-by-play and what it means to work with his former teammate and close friend, Dan Deerdorf. So make sure you join us for that next week. We still don't know if Mitch McGary will test the NBA waters or return for his junior season. We will know soon, though. Next Sunday, April 27th, is the deadline to declare for this year's draft. It's a huge decision that not only impacts Mitch and his future, but also impacts the immediate recruiting strategy for Coach John Beilein. We'll know by this weekend again which way Mitch McGary is going. Coach Hoke says sophomore Shane Morris has closed the gap a bit on Devin Gardner at quarterback. He said if the season started today, Devin would probably be the starter. The bottom line, though, it's good to have the competition and the depth this year at quarterback heading into summer workouts. It looks like incoming freshman sensation Jabril Peppers will see his first action at nickelback, but could end up playing corner or safety this season. Coach Hoke and Coach Madison have been busy thinking about how best to utilize Peppers and his special talents. Where Jabril fits remains to be seen. Brady said we'll see how he comes in and how he does. Last week, Brady said he regretted not fixing the chemistry issues that surfaced with Team 134. He said he should have taken more of a leadership role in getting that whole situation straightened out. He vows he's going to be more assertive this year and said he believes this year's team has better chemistry along with some very solid senior leadership. We won't know for sure until the rubber meets the road this coming season, because that's when leadership and chemistry gets put to the real test. Coming up next on our Michigan Game Day segment, it's time for an April recruiting update, and can we ever get enough recruiting talk? Joining us will be the recruiting editor of the Wolverine magazine and Wolverine.com, Tim Sullivan, here on the Michigan Man Podcast on GBMW Go Blue Michigan Wolverine. Joining us on Michigan Game Day this week is recruiting editor Tim Sullivan of the Wolverine as we take a look at or get an update on the recruiting class of 2015 and maybe even take a look beyond that. Tim, great to have you back on the show.
Thanks for having me.
Well, as we all know, football season comes to an end, then there's spring practice, but with the recruiting season and cycle never ending, isn't it?
Yeah, it seems like it gets more and more year-round as the years go by, and a lot of it nowadays is happening during what are the traditional off-seasons of summer and in the winter time, so it actually is kind of good to have a year-round aspect of the football program to follow.
This time of year, heading, with spring, now we're in April, and then into the summer, what are the quiet periods, or how much contact can staffs have with players?
A new contact period just opened April 15th, and it goes through the end of May, actually. So the staff, it's actually an evaluation period. They can get out on the road and see kids in their schools. In states where they have spring practice, they'll go watch kids practice with their teams. And in other states, including Michigan, they'll just get out there and see individual workouts with some of the players. And so they're actually able to see some live football this time of the year. And since their spring game a couple of weeks ago, there's nobody else who can see that in the state of Michigan, but they're definitely getting some of that in.
And what about during the summer? Is there a quiet period there?
During the summer, yeah, it's a quiet period, so only on-campus evaluations are allowed. There are some exceptions. There's a camp that's been held in Southfield the last couple of years. It'll actually be down in Harper Woods this year, is the Sound Mind, Sound Body camp, and there's an NCAA rule that allows that to be considered an on-campus camp, so the staff can see kids there. But for the most part, over the summer, it's phone calls only or on-campus visits only, and the staff is obviously year-round evaluating film and figuring out which of these kids they do want to make contact with.
Well, Tim, let's start with our class of the 5 hard commits, if there is such a thing these days that we do know about. And let's start with Sean Crawford. He's a kid from St. Edward's High School in Lakewood, Ohio. He's a cornerback. Seems a bit on the smallish side. I guess you never know with these listings. 5'9", 170. What do you know about this kid?
Yeah, he reminds me a lot of a cornerback that can hit really hard. Antoine Winfield, who used to play for Ohio State. He's a little guy, but he hits like a ton of bricks. He plays much larger than he is, and that's something that really helps when you're as little as he is, because 5'9" might even be a little bit of an exaggeration of his height. But he has natural athleticism, and when he has that mentality to come up and hit a kid, that will really help him kind of alleviate any concerns about being too small, quote unquote, to play the position.
And we've got another cornerback committed. He's a bit bigger. Garrett Taylor. He's out of St. Christopher's in Richmond, Virginia, listed at 6'5", 188. I've seen some tape on him. Looks like a pretty nice player.
Yeah, he's a kid that some people think might end up playing safety because he does have that naturally thick build. He can put on some weight. But he has the athleticism and the flexibility to turn and run with receivers at cornerback, and that's where I think he's going to stay. He has those long arms that can help you play against the 6'3", 6'4", 6'5" wide receivers of today. And his natural athleticism combined with that size allow him to be kind of a lockdown man coverage guy. He's kind of in line with what we think the Michigan staff really wants to do going forward, which is play much more physical on the edges. Obviously, the Seattle Seahawks won a Super Bowl playing that way. Michigan State made it to and won a Rose Bowl playing that way. I think we'll see Michigan make that transition, and Taylor's exactly the sort of guy that they will want on the edge to allow them to do that.
Well, of these 5 commits, the third one is also back there in the secondary, and Tyree Kinnell, not sure how you pronounce that. He's out of Wayne High School in Dayton, Ohio. He's a good-sized kid, 6 foot, 190 pounds.
Yeah, Tyree Kinnell is a kid that he'll play safety at Michigan. He could play cornerback, but he's played safety pretty much for his whole high school career, and I think he'll probably stay there when he gets up to Michigan. He does have that kind of thick build that you like to see out of a safety, and he's accustomed to the position because he's been playing it his whole life. He's not the sort of guy that's going to be flashy and go out there and make plays. He's more of a solid coverage guy. Solid, he just does his responsibility instead of going out there and doing the flashy things. But that's what you need when you have cornerbacks who are going to maybe play a little bit more risky in bump coverage, playing out on an island a little bit. You need a safety who can adequately come up and fill those gaps that they're potentially creating.
The next hard commit is a legacy. We're all familiar with this name, John Runyon Jr. John Preps at St. Joseph's in Philadelphia, 6'4", 250 pounds.
Yeah, he's a player that camped at Michigan last summer and earned an offer at Michigan summer camp. People say, he just got the offer because his name is John Runyon. And actually, this Michigan staff has shown that it's actually tougher than you'd expect as a legacy player to get an offer. So they clearly saw something that they liked out of Runyon. We've seen kids like Berkeley Edwards, whose father Stan and older brother Braylon played at Michigan, unable to earn a Michigan offer just because of the name, and he ended up at Minnesota, where it looks like he's going to have a nice career. But when the staff does offer a legacy kid, it's clearly because they like what they see and not just because of the name. Runyon's a little undersized at this point. You mentioned he's only 250 pounds. I think he's added some weight this offseason. Not sure exactly what he's playing at now, but he's an interior prospect because of that height, that 6'4" height. He doesn't have extremely long arms to make up for only being 6'4" to play the offensive tackle positions, but he has the mentality that I think people got used to out of his dad, that kind of over toughness to a certain extent, and that's something that the Michigan coaches really like. And I think once he adds the weight to become a true guard player, he'll be exactly what they're looking for, especially with the move to more of an inside zone. He has the mobility too, and that's really what's going to help him become successful at Michigan.
And Tim, is he one of these under-the-radar kids, though? Because when you look at the various recruiting services, you see 2 and 3 stars around his name, or is it just because he committed that early?
He's not a kid that has done a lot of camps, and that's a lot of times where kids will get the reputations built up where they become 4- and 5-star kids. I think Runyon being a bit of a project because he's only 250 pounds, that's not what he's going to play at as an offensive lineman in college. There's too much variability in terms of how he can develop that has kind of seen the recruiting sites say, you know what, we're going to take a step back and take it easy on this kid. We'll have plenty of opportunities to see him this coming summer and then as a senior, and if he earns it, he can move up in the rankings. I think people know about him, especially since he's committed to Michigan, but it's going to take some time for him to prove it on the field, where he didn't get as much exposure last year, even though St. Joseph ended up winning their sectional title, I believe it is, or maybe even a state title. The setup in Pennsylvania is too weird for me to even understand it, but now that he's on the radar and people know a lot about him, I think he'll really get evaluated, and if he is deserving of moving up, this is his opportunity.
Well, the last of these early, not early commits, but hard commits is Andrew David, who's a kicker from Washington High School, Massillon, Ohio, and a great football city, as we all know. He's a kid, though, that, again, you look at the star ratings for him, he's maybe on average a 2-star. Not a big kid either, 5'9", 165. What do you know about him?
He's a kicker, so the 2-star ranking is nothing to be scared of. It's been a long time since there's been a kicker ranked 4 stars on Rivals at least, so it's just a matter of the position he plays. It doesn't have enough of an impact on the field on a regular basis to earn those higher rankings. David is a pretty consistent kicker. He struggled a little bit as a junior this fall, but I think some of that was kind of the pressure of everybody knows he's a Michigan commit now, and now it's just about returning to getting back to his fundamentals. And that's something that he's been working on this offseason. He's also a very good baseball player. He's a middle infielder, and I think he is hoping to potentially play baseball at Michigan as well. But obviously his football future will be at kicker, and I think he's one that could either kick or punt, or possibly do both depending on what Michigan needs. And he has a strong leg. It's just a matter of honing that consistency out of it, continuing to get even better, especially when he's not kicking off a tee, which he won't be able to in college.
The one position that everyone, we all know, keeps an eye on is quarterback. And, of course, now with Coach Doug Nussmeier on board, we've heard talk of some very, very highly regarded quarterbacks. Where are we, and what names should we be keeping an eye on, Tim?
Yeah, Michigan has only offered 4 quarterbacks, and at this point, all 4 of them are off the table. Josh Rosen committed to UCLA. David Sills committed to USC, both of those guys out of California. Texas Tech for Jarrett Stidham, and Notre Dame for Blake Barnett out of Texas and California, respectively. So it's not quite back to square one because the coaching staff has been evaluating guys all along. But they're certainly, when it comes to making that next offer, they're in the evaluation stages of seeing who in that next tier they really would like to offer. A local kid, Alex Malzone, out of Bloomfield Hills, Brother Rice is one that they're definitely looking at. Several in California, Kyle Kearns out of Pleasanton, Brady White out of Newhall, and Travis Waller out of Anaheim are all getting looks. And there are some on the East Coast, too. Brandon Wimbush out of St. Peter's Prep in New Jersey is a big one. But really this coaching staff is taking the time to see all these kids throw during that evaluation period that we talked about earlier. And whichever one that they like the most, I think that's where they'll go with the offer. And they'll go down the list until they find a guy who thinks that Michigan is the place for him.
Well, of all those names, our local kid from Brother Rice, Alex Malzone, I have to admit, I try to keep up on the high school scene and the recruiting, but that's a name that sort of popped up recently that I hadn't heard much about. He's a pro-style quarterback, isn't he?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he did not start for Brother Rice as a sophomore. He split time with a quarterback, Shane Lacanaria, who ended up in D3 football. But Malzone is transitioning from a full-time baseball player to primarily a football player who still plays baseball, and that's something that's kind of kept colleges a little slower in the evaluation process because he's a kid that hasn't been a year-round football player, which is the norm for quarterbacks nowadays. So he's a kid that's getting some evaluations, and I think he would be a good fit for Michigan. Now they're still going to look and see if there are better fits out there, and there might be but he's definitely one that grew up a Michigan fan. His dad has season tickets to Michigan and will definitely get looks from the Wolverines.
Who are some of the other big